if you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in and enjoy.
Today's guest on Horse Chat is Ella Bradshaw. Now, Ella has a predominant riding interest in eventing, so I'm keen to talk to her about that, but I'm really excited to talk to her about a research interest, which is horse behaviour and welfare. But before I introduce Ella, just want to remind you about the vision of International Horse College it is now. I keep thinking Online Horse College, which we were for a long time, but now we're International Horse College because of the international students we have. We feel that we're really an international college. If you've got the same vision as International Horse College, which is to have a world where people safely appreciate, respect and enjoy their horses, and the horses appreciate, respect and enjoy their people, then have a look at our website, internationalhorsecollege.com, registered training organisation 31352. And on that note, we're going to introduce Ella Bradshaw, who has that research interest in horse behaviour and welfare. I'm really excited to talk to you about that. How are you, Ella?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, very good, very good. Excited to talk to you, Ella, but before we even get started, I'd like to introduce people and their favourite quote, because I think that gives a bit of a look between the lines almost, depending on what your quote is, what your philosophy is, and it says quite a few things about you. So what have you got for a favourite quote today?
Well, I've actually got two. And I suppose it depends on how rough a day I'm having.
Yep.
So I always like the quote, remember why you started, because I think with horses it's really important to remember that, ourselves or pretty much anyone in this industry started because they just love these animals. And it's important to keep that in sight with all the decisions we make as we learn more.
Mm.
And then my other one is a Winston Churchill quote, which is, if you're going through hell, just keep going. Because sometimes you just have those rough days. And, if you're in horses, you know what I mean.
Yeah. I like those quotes. There's another one of Winston Churchill that's the outside of a horse being good for the inside of a man. That's sometimes used as well. But the remember why you started, I think, is particularly important because, we talk about the magical connection with horses and how you got into them and everything else. But sometimes I think people forget about that, and that's when it becomes a welfare problem, is people forget and they don't have the same empathy for the horse and the same connection as they used to have. And I think you've just got to keep coming back. Why did you start? Why did you start down this path in the first place? And that's important. Ella, your research, horse behaviour and welfare, what made you start down that path?
I think it was a combination of something I've always, been really interested in. Mm-hmm. That whole idea of we use horses, and obviously in today's social climate, that concept of horses is becoming more and more, like the social license for it is becoming more tenuous. People are questioning what the role is of horses in today's society and how we should be using them.
You must have gone to the talk with Rolly Owers from World Horse Welfare, did you?
So I did watch that online.
Yep.
He does great work, I suppose. Yeah, and absolutely, and that was a core concept that I was investigating in my research with horse behaviour and welfare, and how we can better measure and assess it so that we can sort of have this more solid social license and relationship with the general public. We need to be able to prove or know that what we're doing is in the horse's best interest. And if we can't do that, then I think it's pretty easy to understand why people have concerns.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like we've got to have permission to do what we do, particularly as competitive riders. That we get
Absolutely.
people that, and not saying that all competitive horses are happy, but, I think if people are really looking to keep a happy, willing horse, then that's what they want right through. It doesn't matter about the competitions. They'll stop a horse if the horse is not happy, and I think that needs to be recognised. Yeah. But sorry, I interrupted. Keep telling me about how you were talking about being interested in the social licensing and the welfare, but keep going about how you went down that path.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I guess my main influence would be Hayley Randall, because she was one of my lecturers during my undergrad at Charles State University. And then, we just, I guess we're quite similar, which is something that I will own quite proudly, because I think she's fantastic. And she offered to me to do honours with her, and she kind of presented the project to me. And I just jumped on the chance because, as I said, that idea of horse welfare and improving it's really important, but it can be really hard to sort of understand where to start or how to go about, looking at it or investigating it or trying to affect change on it. And so he sort of illuminated that path forward for me, and I already had an interest in research. I'd done some research at the Veterinary Diagnostics Lab at Charles State University with sheep, actually, not with horses. I loved the concept of research. I loved the project that was in front of me, and I had an interest in that area. So it was all my boxes being ticked.
Now, this the horse behaviour, and I like to think that I'm interested in safety around horses, but how much do you think horse behaviour affects safety around horses? I shouldn't say, it's the recognition and the knowledge of the horse behaviour and being able to apply that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is actually so important. There's quite a few papers out there now on a student's recognition of horse behaviour and their interpretation of it. So they've done quite a few on vet students and equine science students, and presented them with a few different videos of horses performing behaviours and asked them to make judgments on that horse from what they're seeing. And considering the dangerousness of working with horses, whether it's in the clinical context as a vet, or even, majority of horse handling accidents come from being on the ground with them rather than riding. The scores were a little alarming, to be honest, that people weren't reading the behaviour correctly and, I suppose, interpreting it incorrectly. And then, their subsequent judgments from that could put them in really dangerous situations down the road if they can't understand what they're seeing and responding accordingly. We're putting people at risk.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the vet students. Sometimes people grow up, they love dogs and cats. People say, oh, look, you're so good with animals, you should be a vet. And they become a vet. Now, they're the ones that you're a bit worried, that they have a minimal exposure to horses, yet they're still qualified to treat horses. And while they might say, look, I'm only going to do dogs and cats, I don't do horses, someone's going to be at a dog and cat surgery and they say, look, my horse just needs stitching, he's quiet, I'll bring him right up. You don't have to travel to him, it's just you're the only vet in the area at the time. And they, at some stage in their career, they're going to be working on a horse. So I can understand, how important this whole research about the behaviour is.
Yeah, and it's you're completely right. They're always going to be associated by a public as someone who can help them with a sick or injured animal, and whether that's horses or not, they are, as you said, qualified to treat, and that doesn't mean that they've had extensive horse practice. They might have a bit of formal handling within the course, and then they would have done their placements, but a lot of those key behavioural indicators for experienced horse people end up becoming second nature. The way that you react to a horse swinging around, the way that you react to a horse's body language, their positioning of their head and neck posture, all of that. We interpret that quickly and we read it quickly and we react quickly. When they don't have that ability to do the same, yet again, we're putting people at risk, or they're putting themselves at risk. So it's definitely a conundrum that is presented to people heading into the veterinary field. What do we do? How do we maximise their handling and exposure as safely as possible, whilst having to deal with the fact they've got an incredibly large curriculum that's already time-consuming with content? How do we balance that?
So I'm going to sort of jump around now, still thinking along the horse behaviour, and I know that you were given your first horse. Is that right? Tell us about that day.
Yeah.
Because every little girl wants to be given their horse. And I know when I was young, I wouldn't have cared what horse it was, but I just needed to get a horse. It's almost like I just need any horse, any horse, not the right horse. But tell us about your first horse.
Yeah. I think I learnt the hard way that being given any horse is really not, doesn't really work out for most people. My great aunt and great uncle lived over in WA, and they ran a horse stud called Carindale, and they bred thoroughbred race horses. And when my mum was, a young teenager, they sort of did the same for her, where they had a horse that had retired from racing, and they just said, here, have the horse, and ride it. I think I was a bit more fortunate than I, in the sense that horse transitioned quite quickly to just being a general pleasure horse. My first horse was a lovely thoroughbred gelding by one of their stallions called Brown Range. Unfortunately, and you know what, I'm not even going to say that there's anything wrong with him, but it's what always happens, or what often happens when you have a horse with minimal education and a rider that's just trying to figure everything out. You get those crossed wires,
Sure.
My timing and my cues would have been all over the place, and he would have got confused, and he did what any self-respecting horse would do, and he asked me to dismount, and sometimes made me dismount.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, it wasn't a dream come true in terms of, young girl gets her first horse and rides off into the sunset happily ever after. But what did happen was, once you've got your first horse and your foot's sort of in the door, Mum couldn't really get me back out again. So then it became a matter of finding a more appropriate horse. But we did end up keeping Henry, my first horse, till the day he passed away, which was a couple of years ago now.
Okay. That was probably a good story. So as a person that's interested in horse behaviour, you're not going to recommend a horse like that?
No, and I still think that it was a really important experience for me, because as a young kid who didn't really know what was happening or why things were going so wrong, and I'm looking at all my friends who are taking their horses to pony club and they're going to events and they're winning competitions, and I'm sitting there going, well, why can't I just do that? Why isn't it that easy? I was absolutely devastated and I couldn't figure it out. And so I think even then it sort of spurned that need for me to learn and understand why things were going wrong.
Yes.
And so we did actually, by this point, my instructor at the time had given me one of her horses temporarily, and I was riding her and having the world's best time on a very educated, safe horse, and getting that confidence back. But we did end up taking him to the Australian Equine Behaviour Centre, so ABC, run by Andrew McLean, for some re-education, and watching what they could do with him in a very short period of time using that evidence-based learning theory training program that they do was really eye-opening for me, that there is a different way. And, you can't just write horses off as naughty, because it's not about that. So that was a really big learning curve for me at a young age.
I think that's an important learning curve for anyone, is, that horses, it's not that they're naughty, they're reacting the way that is the most, that they think that, is going to be the best outcome for them.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm sad I had to learn it the way I did, and I'm lucky I didn't get more injured in the process, but I'm glad that it was a lesson I learned. And, as I said, it was a happy story in the end. He stayed with our family until he passed away. So I always had that horse, and I'll always respect him for getting my foot in the door, because once I had a horse, there was no way I was letting Mum not have another horse for me. So, as much as it was a rude introduction to horse ownership, it got me where I am now.
What do you think makes horse people different? You're saying, well, you could have gone either way. It could have been, I'm never going to ride a horse again, it's just too dangerous and I get injured all the time. But what makes horse people different to other people? What's core skills, character traits do they have?
I think there's a few different things. I think you have to be persistent. There's going to be setbacks. No matter what horse you get, there's going to be a time where they're injured. There's going to be a time when you're injured. There's going to be a time when it feels like the wheels are falling off as you're sort of transitioning from one, educational platform to another, and you're learning new skills. It's not always a straight line to success. So you've got to be able to just keep pushing through, which I suppose is the days where I refer to that Winston Churchill quote, whereas it feels like you're going through hell to keep going, because you will come out the other side of it. And then I think, patience is obviously a pretty important one. There's not really much room for ego in working with horses successfully. So you've got to be patient. And then I think the last thing you need is a sense of humour, because if you can't laugh about it, you're just going to end up crying.
Yes, for sure. And what do you think is the best thing about working in the horse industry?
But it's always something new. If you want to keep learning, then the horse industry is probably not for you, because every horse is a different individual, and you're going to be presented with a challenge, and something that worked so well for one horse is not going to be the answer for another. And I know that some people sort of find that a bit frustrating, but for me, that's just an opportunity to learn a new skill. It's for someone I've dealt a lot with, I guess, learning theory and predominantly negative reinforcement with horses. I started dabbling a bit in positive reinforcement because I came across a situation that just wasn't coming to the conclusion I'd hoped with the negative reinforcement processes I had in place. So I thought I'd give it a whirl, and for that horse, it just really worked. So now that's just another thing I can learn more about and work with and put in my skill set, and that still comes under the operant conditioning, training banner. And yeah, it's just, you get to keep going and keep learning, and you never stop.
Okay. Now, for people to be in the horse industry, though, and this is money aside, but for people to make it, I won't say at the top within their chosen field, all right? What do you think are the challenges?
Would we be talking chosen field as in riding or chosen field as in research?
That's why I'm saying in their chosen field, you might say, oh, well, who's a top horse person? And you might think, well, if you win gold at the Olympics, you might be a top horse person. But if you've done some breakthrough research, that's still top in your area, in your niche. So what are the challenges? If you've got aims, because you're going on to do your PhD now, so I'm sure you'll have, and you might say, oh, that's what I want to do, but then you'll find some research that you're really interested in, or something else. What sort of challenges do you expect to have on your way within your chosen niche?
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think you're going to have to deal with things never really going to plan. I think it's really easy to have a goal and want to work towards it, and you have an idea of the steps you're going to take to get there. I've learned to accept that tangents are inevitable. You might have to sidestep at some point. You might have to push forward sooner than you thought. You might have to hold back when you thought you'd be going. And I think that kind of applies to both writing as well as research. It's to get to the top, it's never going to be a straight line. You're never going to have a contingency plan for everything that comes your way. If you have been able to just go from A to B and that's worked for you, then I think you're in a very blessed minority. But, for most people I know, things never really unfurled the way they hoped. They got somewhere sooner than expected or later than expected, or, they had to do different degrees in order to get to their PhD because they just weren't getting the results that they hoped, and it wasn't meant to, it wasn't a reflection of whether or not they were capable of doing the PhD. But sometimes, research just doesn't go your way. I mean, in my honours thesis, my whole research and experiment design changed halfway through, which was just not something I was planning for. But that happens, and you've just got to take those punches and keep rolling.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Thinking about horse care, looking after horses, because you're sort of working with other students and vet students and everything else, what do you think is the biggest problem that people have? There's two questions here. One is horse welfare, and then I'm going to ask you also about horse behaviour. So the biggest problem that they've got now, but I also want to talk about how to address it, because, we're about education. We want to learn how to look after our horses better, how to interpret them better, work with them better. So if you can answer those two questions, it'd be great.
Yeah, great questions. I think that the biggest issue that we have with horse behaviour, and I guess horse ownership a lot just in general, is that it can often be rooted in tradition and the way things were always done. Or, my grandfather raised horses his whole life and he's always done this, and it always turned out fine. And the practices aren't being reflected on or questioned as we improve our knowledge of how to work with horses and understanding how the horse learns and interprets its environment. So, things that we can do with horses management-wise or training-wise that worked 20 years ago and wouldn't blink at, like we need to reassess them. And we run into trouble because a lot of the time when you challenge someone's long-held beliefs, they can almost bunker further down to their certainty that they're right, because no one likes to be told they're wrong. And I suppose this is where the remember why you started is really important, because, it can be frustrating for academics trying to give out new information to the public about, things we can do to change, things we can change to improve horse welfare and horse management. And a lot of the time, people just don't want to hear it because it's not how they do things. It's complete opposite. That they're thinking about their ego there and not wanting to be wrong, and they're not thinking about whether or not things that they thought were right may actually be right. So that would definitely be the biggest problem I've found when it comes to sort of taking that step between doing the research and trying to get it to gain traction within the industry, is that if it's something that really challenges what they believe, it can be quite hard to get traction on that change.
Okay. I sort of expected, because I know that you work a lot with Dr. Hayley Randall, and the last time she was on, she said her biggest thing that she'd like to change with welfare is people thinking that they're doing the right thing but over-rugging horses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not just the training, it's everything in the management. I don't know how much more research we need on, scraping your horse after hosing it isn't necessary in hot weather. But, there's still a large contingent of people that will not accept that information, thinking that it affects the horse's thermoregulation and heats them up. But, if that were true, horses wouldn't sweat to cool themselves down. So it's just you've got to be very patient and deliberate with the way that you give the information out, and, try not to be aggressive with it, because that never works.
Yeah. If people were going to change one thing about the way they handle horses, and thinking that people want to do the right thing, the majority of people do remember where they came from. The majority of people want to do the right thing. The majority of people may overfeed their horses or over-rug them or overdo something else, but they genuinely want to do the right thing. And, if they sort of keep doing the research. But what's one thing then, horse handling, horse behaviour-wise, that people aren't recognising, aren't seeing?
I think one of the things that I would really love to see people let go of is, and it's just something that I think has been normalised. I guess when we deal with horses, the idea that when we don't get the correct response, the horse is being willful or ignorant of what we're asking it, or anything like that. Instead of reflecting and saying, well, how am I asking? Did I apply the cue correctly? Has it been applied consistently? Can I expect them to give me the correct answer if you've never asked it before, and that type of thing. And there's still a lot of language revolving around, he doesn't want to do it, or he's not doing it on purpose, and that type of thing. And the more we can consciously change that pattern of thinking, I think we'll see a much better increase in the way we deal with horses, because that's just not how they process information.
Yes, so it's while horses have got feelings and emotions, they're not the same as people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. No, I think that's great.
In essence, we're trying to speak to someone who doesn't speak our language.
Yes.
They don't, they do a very good job of trying to learn what we want in our language the best they can, but, we're sort of responsible for them, so we've got to try and learn their language as much as they've got to learn ours.
Yes, and they are trying to tell us things, but we've got to listen.
Exactly.
Now, Ella, I know you're doing a PhD now, but competition-wise, you're still competing?
Yeah, well, as much as you can during Corona.
Yep.
I actually just a dressage competition, a virtual one, on the weekend.
Yep.
One of the local dressage clubs held a virtual dressage competition, which is fantastic. And that was the first competition back for me in about, I think, 18 months.
Okay.
Because unfortunately my young thoroughbred was injured, and it took the better part of a year to sort of rehab that injury and get him firing again.
Mm-hmm.
So we had entered our first real competition, and then Corona shut everything down and cancelled it. So online, yes, we are still competing, and once the competitions enter up again in real life, I will be trying the hardest I can to get to as many as I can. We're lucky to have some really great competitions around here, Wagga and Albury and a few other places nearby, so that's fantastic.
And you love thoroughbreds. That's a reflection of your great aunt, is it?
Yeah, you would think that after the nightmare experience that was my first horse, I would not be wanting anything to do with them, but you know, that first horse was quickly followed up with a second horse who was also a thoroughbred who competed to, then it was 2-star, it'd be 3-star in today's today's rankings. You know, and she was the most patient, loving horse. I think I was 14 years old and she was about 17, 2 pounds tall. And you couldn't have asked for a horse to take better care of a young rider. You know, she would cart me on those cross-country courses with that absolute purpose and love for her job. You know, she didn't think much of the dressage arena, and I was very careful not to ask that concern too often. But as soon as you got her out on cross-country, I guess it's where you can really feel that sense of understanding and love for what they do, which would yet again be, I guess, why I chase horse behaviour and welfare and sort of looking at how we analyse that and assess it, because anyone who's sat on a horse that loves their job knows that horse loves their job, but trying to prove that is a whole other kettle of fish.
Okay.
But yeah, ever since then, I've just had thoroughbreds.
Yep. Look, I had, an FEI dressage horse that was a thoroughbred, and this is sort of at the time where people were just starting to not use thoroughbreds and, go on to warm bloods. And, I just think, a horse is a horse and you just want to have the best horse. And I particularly like thoroughbreds. I like, they're a bit hotter. And even now, a French warm blood, a bit hotter than the German warm bloods. And I prefer the hotter breeds myself, but, that's just, maybe I'm just lazy and don't like, I prefer the hotter breeds, the more sensitive breeds, the ones that need the more subtle aids. That's my choice.
Yeah, well, I always like to know that the horse is doing more work than I am when I'm riding it. I certainly with you, and I don't want to be sitting on top of a horse and constantly encouraging it to have some kind of work ethic.
Exactly. You just naturally want to go forward.
I think that thoroughbreds just, when you get a good one, they might not be as well built for a lot of the jobs today as the purpose-bred warm bloods and everything, but when you get a good one, you can't fault the way they try for you.
Yep. Ella, thank you for chatting to us today. I really enjoyed that, really appreciated your time. I'm sort of looking forward to staying in touch with you, particularly with your research. And I think that sometimes you've just got to do the research to either prove or disprove. And, I'm sure that some research, is going to work out a little bit different to what the person initially thought of. But I think the fact that you can either prove or disprove, and it's scientifically backed, and you've got that sort of evidence-based science, I think that's just so important. It gets rid of the old wives' tales that don't work, but it defines and confirms the old wives' tale that do work.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff rooted in tradition that's still applicable today and still just as useful. But, as you pointed out, there's plenty of things that we've got to look at, reflect on and critique and decide whether or not they've got a place in modern horse training and management, for sure.
Yeah. Now, Elle, if people would like to contact you, ask questions, what's the best way?
I'd say probably contacting me via email would be the best way. And I think you've got my email there.
We do. And we'll put those... Yeah, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to list it out, but to be honest, it's got my double-barrel surname in there, so it's probably best to sit it down.
Well, it's probably easy if they, if they want to go to the bottom of your page. Now, just go to horsechats.com, search for Ella or search for Bradshaw. Phone number, Ella, is there one there if people want to send you a quick text or give you a call?
If anyone wants to send me anything, it's 04100 66 366.
Perfect. And that number will be on the bottom of your page as well, Ella. So just go to horsechats.com, search for Ella, search for Bradshaw, and we'll put those details on the page. So Thank you, Ella. Looking forward to catching up with you again and finding out how far along you've come and getting some new insights from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely honoured that you asked me to come on.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.